So welcome back to Track A, KM Practices and Strategies. My name is Juanita Richardson. I'm still your moderator today for Track A, and I'll be back here tomorrow for more of the same. Our session this afternoon is Designing KM Strategy to Support Federal Mandates, and our speakers are Mark Gross and John Yoakley. They have asked that you keep questions to the end because, you know, these are zippy presentations, and so at 3:10 we'll open it up for questions, and I'll let them take it away. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm Mark Gross. I'm president of Data Conversion Laboratory. John Yoakley, president and CEO of PTFS. And we're both involved in working with all kinds of documents. And there's two sets of mandates we want to talk about today. There's two impending federal mandates, which really affect the whole knowledge management community because there's just so much data involved in both of these. So M2307, they both have really fascinating names. M2307 involves the National Archives, and as of June 30th, 2024, so that's not that far away, that's only 8 months away, they won't be accepting any more analog formats. So no more paper, no more microfilm, whatever else. And if you know what the NARA has huge warehouses all over the place, so you can tell why they don't want to take any more of this paper. So they won't be accepting digital formats, and John will talk about that in more detail. The other one is the OSTP memo, another very memorable name. OSTP is the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is an office of it's an office that advises the president, so it's part of the executive branch, and that involves not so much government prepared documents, but all kinds of anything that is been paid for by the government in one way or another needs to be made available to the people at no cost. So as you may or may not know, most scientific research is funded at least in part by the federal government. So this really affects, I don't know if it's half of all scientific research, but something close to that. And it also affects not just the research that's published in journals and stuff, it also affects anything that the government publishes itself. So anything that the government is producing also needs to be made available, and it needs to be, anything that's front-facing needs to be available and accessible. So I'll be talking about that, and I will turn this over to John to talk about M2307. Really have to come up with a better name for that, John.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes, well, it's not much better than your title. Okay, so
I didn't make that one either.
I'm going to go really fast today, but we are going to have a question and answer period, and also all hang around in the room or at the coffee break if you have any other questions. So, because we're going to cover all of these topics in like 15 minutes. So we're going to cover what is a federal mandate, what does it mean for government, a little bit about records management for those of you that don't know what that is or don't know much about it. How do government agencies comply? Of course, we're going to talk about AI, ML a little bit, and how can it help with all of this records management stuff. And then, goodness gracious, what happens if I just can't do it? So M2307, it's a great name. It's an executive order. It's authored by the Office of Management Budget and NARA for electronic stuff, right? So it's an Electronic Records Act. It's not new. It supersedes 3 other ones that were started, I believe, by Bill Clinton, the first one, and have more or less been not complied with over the years. And they're trying to put a little bit more teeth into this one. So we'll see what happens. The memo was released at the end of 2022, and it requires that all agencies manage their records in an electronic format. I'm going to talk a lot about that. It requires that you transfer permanent records to NARA only in electronic format. And starting in next July, which is not that far away, as Mark pointed out, agencies must digitize all their physical and analog records for transfer to NARA. And last but not least, agencies must transition to full electronic record keeping in accordance with something called the Electronic Message Preservation Act. What does that mean at the highest level? Well, you have to use a records management system or some kind of an electronic system, not pen and paper or a spreadsheet. You have to use a system that's recognized by the National Archives, their Fermi requirements. Also, you have to deliver only digital data to NARA, but more, what's a bigger deal than that is that their agencies are directed to close their paper and analog storage facilities that have been maintained and created over decades and decades and decades and switch to electronic records keeping. And last but not least, how do you do that? Digitize. I'm going to talk a lot about that. So for those of you that don't know much about records management, it's nothing new. The first Federal Records Act was established in 1950. There's Title 36 that specifies records management policies, and Title 18 specifies penalties for if you don't do it. That would be an interesting read, I'm sure. What is the records management life cycle? So create and receive, maintain and use, and disposition or transfer, and I'll talk about that in more detail. A typical records management program has a file plan. And the file plan is either something built into the electronic records management system, or a lot of agencies just used a spreadsheet, which is probably not going to be permitted in the future. But it basically supports a records retention schedule, so records are categorized in different categories, and each of them has a records retention, 7 years, 10 years, 3 years, or permanent. If they're deemed a permanent record, they have to be managed accordingly and then transferred to the National Archives and can't ever be destroyed. So accessibility, indexing, and storage is under records management programs, compliance and auditing, and transfer, and finally disposal or transfer. So what's different about electronic records management systems? Well, I'll talk more about this, but the biggest thing is finding all your electronic records. Because if they're physical records, you got file cabinets and you got boxes and you got shelves and you can see them and touch them. If you have electronic records, they can be in SharePoint portals all over God's creation. They can be in drives that are offline in somebody's desk drawer. They can be on laptops. They can be all over. So what do you do? What's a best practice for procuring an electronic records management system that complies with the National Archives requirements? Well, we recommend that you do an RFI. The federal government is big on RFIs. We respond to them all the time. And do an RFI and ask the questions that you want to ask. And there's a whole bunch of vendors that there's a couple of vendors listed here, but there's many more of them that will reply to your RFI. Also, the GSA has a whole bunch of really good resources on their website for records management. They have something called Research as a Service, Market Research as a Service that you should definitely go to and check out. They have their NARA Universal Electronic Records Management System specifications, so you want to make sure that whatever you buy, it complies with that. There's a GSA Schedule SIN that lists all the records management systems that have said that they comply, SIN 518210, and they also have use cases that you can download. So there's a lot of stuff. GSA is really trying to help with this. So the other thing we recommend for best practice is ask for product demonstration. And before you get the product demonstration, send the vendor your requirements that might be unique, such as federated indexing or digitization functionality, OCR, if you want AI or whatever for metadata or automated metadata creation. Next, consider a pilot. So a lot of government agencies have the ability to do a pilot. Some of them even can do it on a credit card for $10,000 or $50,000 without a competitive procurement, so you might consider that. And last but not least, definitely use GSA's SIN to procure, which lists all the records management systems. So can you get knowledge management and information management and records management all at one time? Maybe. Maybe you can do that. So some of the systems are getting pretty advanced. So they're not just records management systems. They give you knowledge management and content management. And so on the left-hand side, as I said, first you got to find all your data, and it can be it's a zillion different locations and file shares. It can be in email servers. It can be in It can be in SharePoint portals. And once you, and I'm talking about this more in the same slide, but once you put your data under governance, you find it all, then you can actually use it and go into the records maintenance stage, use it for analytics, research, legal, FOIA, D-class, all of those things, and then perform records management. So the hard part is getting your handle on all the electronic records, indexing them and categorizing them. The systems will help you do that. And in the future, we think AI is going to help you do that too. So what's a good way to find all your electronic information that's all over everywhere in all kinds of different formats? So we call this federated index. The challenge is the content might be in different data sources that exist within your organization, and you want to go out and find that data, index it so you can categorize it and use it and get into the next phase, which is content governance, content management, and data use, and records dissemination and maintenance and so forth. So the system will go out and crawl all these different resources, whether it be a SharePoint portal or AutoCAD files or shared drives. It'll crawl them, it'll build what's called a federated index, and now it'll allow you to search, find, replace, categorize, disseminate information across your entire organization. And that's really the hardest part of this new requirement that you're going to face, is finding all your stuff, because if you want to do analytics and you don't have all the data, you get the wrong answer. So what's a best practice for delivering data to NARA? Well, NARA only allows certain file formats of every media type to be delivered. So you have to first figure out, okay, so what file types am I delivering, and make sure you comply. I'm only on this slide, I'm going to talk about paper in the interest of time, but so digitized papers and photographs and other things that are basically that you can read. So they can come from two sources: hard copy paper, which you digitize, or what we call born digital. And regardless of how they come in, we recommend that you use a PDF-A. A PDF-A is like a PDF frozen in time. A long time ago, Adobe released the code for PDF, a PDF-A, so that it could become an ISO standard. And what that means is years into the future, a vendor can't change stuff and allow us not to look at the data that you have. And so PDF-A is really an excellent thing to consider, and it ensures reliable access to your documents for the long term, making great for digital preservation and long-term archiving. How does it work? You input the data, you create a PDF-A. You also NARA requires that you also develop a rich metadata record. Well, the great thing about this is the metadata and the document all ride in one package, so that you don't have to have a metadata file and a digital object file and another file. They all reside in one package that you can then either ingest into your records management system or ultimately deliver to NARA, and it makes it much simpler, and they would appreciate that as well. So how about record capture if your data is physical? So we mostly think about physical data. We think about scanning, and most of us have a copy machine now that scans. But really, record capture and the requirement is for any analog format now. So that includes microfiche and microfilm and analog video like your VHS and beta tapes, even movie film, right? So you can't deliver movie film to the National Archives. You have to make digital video out of that. And what that means, what makes it difficult, is for every one of those media types to do it at scale and production, you need a different piece of hardware and equipment that's, for the most part, pretty expensive. So we would recommend that you find a good place and a good vendor to outsource this to, right? Outsource it. So I'll talk a little bit about that. A modern digitization services bureau has the ability to convert all kinds of analog material, whether it be movie film or analog video or big engineering drawings or whatever it is. But also, it's not just the digitization of it to create a record, right? You have to do other stuff like optical character recognition to make it searchable, or develop metadata, because that's a requirement for the National Archives. So in order to do content conversion, it's not just one step. It looks like this. So to do it at scale, you need a large-scale digitization workflow solution. So on the left-hand side, you have the digitization process. The scanners can be a paper scanner, a film scanner, a fish scanner, a movie scanner, an analog converter. It can be all kinds of stuff. But then after you get that, you need to oftentimes enhance these images to make the best possible OCR. Then you need to create a metadata record. Well, we used to always do it manually. Now there's ways to semi-automatically create metadata records. So with that, we have to do OCR conversion, and at the end of the day, like I said, we recommend PDFA. So you take all that stuff, you make one PDF package, you can put it in your records or content management system, and then ultimately deliver it to NARA. So, can AI/ML help my agency with records management? We think so. We think this is probably in the next decade going to be the biggest game changer in this industry. It's going to help with every phase of what you have to do, which includes record creation. How's that? Well, handwriting, there are a lot of records are in handwriting. OCR doesn't really deal with handwriting, but some at all. But some of these new AI systems that are coming out now can recognize with pretty good accuracy handwriting. We've tested them. My signature is about the world's worst, and it can get my signature and convert it into searchable text, which is amazing. So records maintenance and use, I think, will be big. AI/ML will help a lot with that. So, for example, in research and in response to legal requests, Privacy Act, FOIA, especially declassification, automated records routing, document deduplication. That's a big problem with electronic records. So when you categorize all these things, multiple organizations might have the same files. Well, when you deliver them to the archives, if they're permanent, they don't want 15 copies. They want one copy from your organization. So it's really going to help transform, I think, the whole records management and knowledge management industry. So what happens? I mean, June is around the corner, right? June 30th is around. Am I good still? June 30th.
2 minutes left.
I got 2 minutes left.
It's 15 seconds.
2 minutes and 15 seconds.
I know I went really fast. I skipped over some stuff. So June 30th is just around the corner, and this is a lot to ask, right? Manage permanent and non-permanent records all electronically in 8 more months. It might not happen. So what does that mean? Well, the archives has recognized that it might not happen, and it's a bulletin on their website called Bulletin 2020-01, so they must have recognized this a couple years ago. I'm assuming that's the date when they published the thing. And so you have to have quite a good justification, but I happen to know that they have granted delays and some exceptions. I don't think they're going to say you don't have to do it. I think they're trying to have more teeth. Like I said, there's 4 or 5 other executive orders before this one, and the agencies, for the most part, they're what's called an unfunded mandate. So they tell you got to do it, but nobody gives you any money. It has to come out of your agency's budget, your overhead or indirect budget, and so that's less. Especially if you're an agency that does mission, it's at the bottom of the barrel in terms of doing stuff. So we looked at this a little bit. Cost is a big driver for an exception, but you can read it yourself, and there's multiple different ways that you can apply for an exception. But I would recommend that you first try to figure out how much you can do, and in your exception, tell them what you can do by next June and what you won't be able to do, instead of just applying for exception, throwing up your hands and saying, I can't do anything. So thank you very much. We're gonna accept questions at the end, and Mark is gonna talk to us about his great topic with a much better name than M2307.
Well, not much better name, but not much better.
20 seconds.
By the way I remember PDF-A is the A stands for archival, right? That's the reason. That's why it's called PDF-A. It's not like there's an A and a B and a C or anything. So I'm going to talk the OSTP memo, which is a much better name. That stands for that's the Office of what is it, Scientific? I always forget what it is. Science and Technology Policy, and that picture over there, that's the building where it's housed. I think that's the Vice President's office building right there next to the White House, right next to the White House. Yeah. So it's a great looking building. We're dealing with very different kinds of documents here. It's a very different kind of mandate. What John's been talking about is archival documents, which are not intended to be really used very much. It's stuff that you file away, and you just want to be able to find it should you ever need it. This memo is really talking about documents that are really living documents, and it's documents that are intended to be disseminated and people be able to use. So scientific research is disseminated. It'll be used on the large language models, the topic of many of the people over here. It's used for being able to identify things. It's going to be used by ChatGPT. I should have used that in the title. So you got to talk about ChatGPT at some point. So these documents are going to be living. So it really starts with August 25th with something called the Nelson Memo. Nelson is named, it's called the Nelson because Dr. Nelson was the acting director of that office at the time. And it provides guidance that these documents have to be, that documents that are, and this is really documents that in the past were published and you had to pay to use. If you wanted to get articles published in Hart Journal or any of these other journals, you had to subscribe. Your library had to subscribe. So the intent of this is to provide access to scholarly publications and data coming from federally funded research. And as I mentioned before, a lot, and it's probably 50% or maybe more, is funded research. So the deadline of here is a little further along. It's December 31st. So you have till the end of next year for agencies to be able to publish their access policies, and then it has to be implemented by the end of 2025. So the policy itself is, I think, about 8 pages. I actually read it, the whole thing, the other day. But the key piece over here is that last quote of there, from federally funded research made freely available, publicly accessible by default. Now, that's the normal mode, is that documents should be made accessible unless there's some other security reason, something like that, in agency-designated repositories without embargo or delay of application. So this really changes, on one level, it's really changing what the government, what people have to do. It also changes the model of all these publishers, because open access, there's another name for this, open access, which has been around for a while on a voluntary basis. That means that journals will not be able to charge for the subscriptions anymore, which means somebody's funding this stuff. And normally, the journals are now, instead of accepting article publication at no cost to the author and then charging the libraries or the subscribers, it's really flipping around. And the authors or whoever is funding the authors ends up paying for these to be published. But it means that it's available to the user for free. So there's lots of federal agencies. That little chart there, or pie dish, I guess a cookie dish, is like lots of federal agencies, and they're all intended to combine. And the nice thing about deadlines, as we spoke about, is it means people will do something about it at some point, and maybe there'll be some exceptions, but it normally will happen. It will happen. So I know when we were dealing in a totally different industry, in the pharma industry, there's something called there was an SPL, Standard Product Labeling Mandate, which the Federal Drug Administration had put in, and it was voluntary, and nobody did it. And then, there was a 3-year deadline to make it possible, and suddenly everybody had to do it. So nothing happens as long as it's voluntary. The other mandate that's important over here, even though it's a whole different agency, when we talk about accessibility, when John talks about accessibility, it's being able to find a document. When we're talking about accessibility of content, it's being able to use the content. And there's another mandate called Section 508, which requires that everything the federal government is producing be accessible to visually impaired people. So in order to do that, it's not enough just to have an image of a document and OCR it. You really have a lot more information in a document, and that relates a lot to what's going on over here. And So far, we're saying that all these documents need to be made available. If an agency has paid for it, it needs to be made available to the public. So this mandates in the next few years, but some agencies have going to be doing this for years, right? NIH, through the National Library of Medicine, has been doing this for over 20 years on a voluntary basis. But it's at this point, something like 30% of the documents are out there, and there's a previous mandate that they would put it out after a year of after a year of publication, it would be put on. But in terms of being usable, the memo itself actually mentions it should be something like what NIH is doing. And that's important in terms of the usability of these, because they're using, if you just produce an image of it or you produce a PDF, that's limited usability. It's available on your computer, you can see it, but people today look at it in different ways. They look at it on their phones, they look at it in different pieces. They want to just be able to look at the synopsis of things. So if it's PDF files, you really can't do that because it's an archival format. It stays the way it is. So at least in the scientific publishing industry, the standard has become XML, and people usually glaze over when I mention the word XML, but XML is really just a method of having full text and having tags in it that tell you what belongs there. Did you just tap me? Do I have 2 minutes or something?
No, you're good.
Okay. I didn't think it went that way.
You got like 10 minutes.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I learned how to talk fast from you, even though I'm the New Yorker. So XML is a way of having the text there and having tags to tell the computer what to do with those tags. So if something's going to be a title, it actually says it's a title, and the computer figures out how it should do titles. And if it's a subtitle, it'll do that. If it's a footnote, it'll do that. So if the computer is doing all this, then if you got all the information together, the computer can decide how to make it look differently for your computer screen, differently for your phone, and differently for if you want to print it on paper. So XML has become the standard in a lot of at least the scientific publishing industry, in the legal publishing industry, any place you've got complex documents that have all those things, that have tables, that have footnotes. So I won't read. Maybe I will. XML becomes a single source of truth. It means every version that you're producing is coming from the same source. It's immediate to publish it. It can be done by a computer. You don't have to keep inventories of anything. You don't have to keep multiple PDF versions. Everything is produced basically on the fly. And we talked about semantic tagging. That just means a title is a title and a footnote is a footnote. And multi-channel just means you can go to all these different places. And it supports accessibility, which is very important, because you could put the tagging in. Once you've done something in XML, if you've got the right tagging in, and there's several standards for that, reading to the blind machines can read those automatically. So if you ever watch somebody who is visually disabled looking through a document, they can push a button to just say, show me the next title, show me the next title, show me the next title. That's the one I want. Show me the graphic. And it can read all this because it's got all the cues in it that it needs. So it enables the two mandates over there to very easily be done. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it. And one of the things we've been working with, usually XML is done at the end. Somebody's producing a document, they create the PDF documents, and now you produce the XML documents. Why? Because authors don't really like to write in XML. They like to use Word, or they like to use LaTeX, or they like to use whatever they're using. So it usually ends up all the way at the end. One of the things we've been doing, I'll just mention it briefly, is an automated process that takes Word documents and automatically converts it to XML. Usually this involves a lot of manual work involved doing it, which becomes expensive, is why you do it at the end. The process we've been pioneering over here really lets you do it without hardly any manual work. So it becomes an inexpensive process. And in fact, in our testing over here, we're producing documents in under 10 minutes. And so one of the things that, so the process itself, in this case it produces JATS 1.2, that's one of the standards that's being used in XML. So just to go through how that happens, the process we've been developing is these Word documents come in, they go through a pre-process that checks all kind of things to make sure that it's actually an acceptable document. It's got people's names on it, it's in the right formats and all that. It auto-styles it automatically to figure out what the different pieces are, because remember, I have to tell it something as a title. I can't tell normally in a Word document what a title is, so it's figuring all that out, and then it goes through a conversion step. So I think that the key to this is figuring out if it passed. So there's this confidence in analytics is a process that goes through the document itself and figures out if what got converted makes sense. Is there a title? Is there an author? Is there all those pieces over there? And all the things you expect in a document, did it get there? Are all the footnotes attached to a footnote, and all the 1,000 other things that happen in a document like that? If it passes, it immediately goes back to the user, and that's where you get the under 10-minute times. And if it doesn't, then somebody has to look at it. And that obviously takes longer. But the goal is that, over time, working with an agency working with this would be able to get the times lower and lower by giving authors guidelines and making sure that they're doing things. And that's a way. So once you've got that, it means that the documents you're getting in can immediately go through that process and be immediately disseminated. And as these mandates, today the mandates are fairly loose. They'll get tighter over time. And if the whole concept is that the public get information as quickly as possible and it be as accessible as possible for everybody, these are going to get tightened over time. We really talked about two different things over here, three different things. One is there is a mandate, and the intent is to make information publicly available as soon as possible. There's technology that lets you do it that makes it much easier to work with, and that's that whole XML technology that's really become the standard in many kinds of publications. And the third part is there are processes there, and this is where AI comes in. I call it a process, but this is all AI technology that allows you to take documents and produce in different ways and make it into a finished document that's ready to use. So it's not just, so right now the big publishers are the ones dealing with it, and we're producing work for the big publishers, but we also have several contracts now with government agencies that are trying to jump ahead and be ready for these mandates, because some of these agencies have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of documents that are going to have to be made accessible over time. And so this is a different kind of mandate over here, but these are living documents that will be there over time. And I think that's what I got. So if there's any questions, how did I do?
Yay.
That was very well done, and look at that, you came in on time and everything. I didn't even have to stand.
My favorite is 2 weeks ago I was at a meeting, and somebody was doing like a TED Talk, which was going to be 18 minutes, and she finished 12 seconds early, and she looked at the watch and said, I'm done 12 seconds early, but I'm done. So.
Very good. So Mark and John are happy to entertain questions now. The coffee break in the exhibit hall starts at 3:15, goes from 3:15 to 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock is when the exhibit hall is going to close. Mark's company is there, so he will be there if you have any questions beyond this session. And this is the last day for the exhibit hall, so if you haven't met our vendors yet, make sure you get in there before 4 o'clock. Any questions at this time? We have a question. There we go.
So, PTFS, how much do you charge per document for XML conversion?
That's Mark.
So,
that's you.
Because
yeah, so the way we work is really, the way we've partnered on projects is all that equipment that you saw in that picture, PTF has all this equipment that we don't want to have around. They do all the scanning and imaging and preparatorily. We take it from when the scan is done and create XML from that. And the answer to your question is it depends. It really depends on the kind of documents that they are. So there's very heavy technical documents that need review. There's documents that are mostly like policy manuals and things that will go through almost automatically. So the range is very wide.
Because I'm from the Defense Technical Information Center, and we have people who work with PTFS in terms of scanning. But we're the lead DoD agency to comply with the OSTP memo, and this conversion, this XML requirement could just kill us because we have tens and tens of thousands of
Right.
legacy journal articles that, yeah, they're digitized, they're in PDF format, but they're not, either we've created the XML or the XML might not be compliant.
So-
So that's part of
So it really depends on, it depends, but I'll just give you an example. We've been working for the U.S. Patent Office, which has a similar budgetary limitation. They've got, and for them, we were able to, and imaging was done by another company, I'm sorry. We had nothing to do with it, but we started from the image and created XML out of it, and it was a totally automated process that was at basically 1/20th of the price of what it would be if it requires manual review. So it depends, and it was only effective for two reasons. One is volume was very large, which is similar to what you have, and the question of what level of perfection you need. So perfection is very, very expensive. So Patent Office in conversation was really like, I'm okay with 98% if it costs me 1/20th of the price. That was the trade-off. So that's why I say it depends. So in other areas, so for them it was effective because if somebody wasn't sure about what the XML was, they can always look at the image, right? They can go back and forth, and if you're doing search, you don't need perfection. You're likely to find that red herring there regardless. So I think it worked for them. If you're in a composition environment where you're producing something for the public, you probably do need perfection. So that's what I'm saying. It depends, but it can be it can be highly automated also.
Yeah.
So I know that this is a talk more about our response to the NARA and OSTP mandates and less so a discussion of those mandates precisely, but I'm wondering in your experience if there has been pushback that you've observed for sort of movement to a digital-only gold source record retention strategy?
Yes. There's pushback all the time. In both mandates, there's pushback.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be more involved with that, but the agencies have come back and tell me where I'm going. The agencies have come back as it's impossible, it's too expensive, it can't be done. And that's been true all along. On the publishing side, the publisher said that's going to, how are we going to pay for all this? There's no model for this. So this has been going on. This is not new. The OSTP memo is based on a 2013 memo, which was basically not really followed, which was based on something in the 1990s. So there's pushback, but some agencies have done it and some have not done it yet.
I should have specified the nature of the pushback, less so the pushback around this is hard and more so the pushback around we're introducing unnecessary risk by only putting records into a digital format.
That's not the piece I'm doing. That would be the piece you're
Yeah,
dealing
so
with.
you want to do a Google search for digital preservation, because it's a whole thing that we're all going to have to do now, right? And so there's ways to preserve data that's digital, and for a much longer period of time than physical data. Like if you have microfilm, when I was young and started doing this, microfilm was the way to go, right? Because they said, oh, it'll last 100 years. Well, 50 years later, or 40 years later, that microfilm, when we open these cans, it's all ammonia, it's disintegrating, and now we have to take that microfilm and convert it to digital. So digital doesn't have an ammonia process. There's nothing going wrong with that. And so there's lots of ways to do digital preservation, and it's just going to get better.
Right, and DVDs and CD-ROMs also. I remember buying 100-year rated CDs, but who knows? So, I mean, digital really has, it's digital. I mean, as long as you maintain it over time, it'll last forever.
Yeah, it doesn't
Right,
change.
because it's just a bunch of bits that, but you have to, there are things you have to do. There are standards on how you do that, though.
Any last questions?
Yeah.
So you mentioned like record keeping was being done in Excel, and that is eventually going to go away, correct?
Well, I don't know if NARA is going to come in and audit you, but they tell you that if you read the regulations, that you have to use a records management system. And an Excel spreadsheet, I would not think is considered a records management system.
Many people are doing that though, I'm just curious. 'Cause,
Lots of them.
yeah, I think my agency's one.
Lots of them, up until now, are using a spreadsheet, right? Lots and lots.
When do you think that'll go away, or when will you think
Well, this mandate says it has to go away by next June.
by next June?
Yes.
What about SharePoint? Do you use SharePoint?
So SharePoint is a storage search media. It's not a records management system at all. Now, Microsoft has records management add-on products for SharePoint that you can utilize. And so, again, I would just do the evaluation that we talked about in the slide to see what works for your agency, because there's many systems that are out there. The good thing about SharePoint is, for many of the agencies, it's free. The bad thing about it is that it's free, and it doesn't do a lot of things that some of the other systems can do.
So there's, just for information sharing, OSD has a website and has approved electronic record keeping software, and it lists out the different jurisdictions in electronic keeping and which one has it, and it has a board that goes and validates it because it has so many records and they're global. So there is that as a resource. I think it's JVAL. But if you look at it, they keep that, and you can go right click and do it, and that way you know what numbers to reach out to.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because I think someone at a higher level is doing this for my agency, and I think they passed this for a spreadsheet, so I'm kind of curious how they're actually doing it, if they're just taking that information.
So if you go to the GSA's website, they list all the, so this requirement says that you have to comply with several different NARA requirements for electronic records management system. And if you go to the GSA website, it lists ones that comply. So you can see them. Go to GSA MASN 51821. It's also a GSA schedule that you can buy the product from, but the vendors, including us, have published their systems on there, right? And if they're on there, they're theoretically supposed to comply with National Archives' new ERM standards.
Just a comment, it's my experience that even a 508C Word doc or PowerPoint does not convert to a 508C PDF. The PDF won't be compliant, and you still have to go in.
This is for you.
Yes. I didn't write the software. No, that's right.
Well,
That's
I'm just
true.
saying, you think if you put that,
Yeah,
if
it's
you
not-
convert it to PDF and put it on your
But-
SharePoint, that you're meeting the standard for
Yeah,
508C
but,
and you're not.
yeah, so there's also some variance on what level of 508 people need to do, so, yeah, but it's not, there's still problems in that area. I mean, we've had to fix up those kind of
Well,
documents.
working with your VI employees is really helpful because they can tell you if it's something they can read.
Yeah, but it's a big issue. I think that's gonna get better over time. The problem is like, if you haven't built the document right in the first, like if you haven't used the right colors, then your document is gonna be compliant and nothing is gonna fix that.
So take some
Right.
508C training.
Right, so, and actually, that's a good idea, but it's not, and it's not just, it's color. I mean, color blindness is a much bigger problem than total visual deficiency. Like 10% of the population has some level of color blindness, so it's a real issue. But people don't usually think of that. Right?
Is your shirt orange? Or pink? That looks pink to me.
This is part of the test.
So So Mark's company is in the exhibit hall. I'm sure you guys are gonna be hanging around there for a bit. There is coffee. The exhibit hall does close today at 4 o'clock. That's your last chance to visit with the vendors.
And I think the coffee is in the exhibit hall.
Yeah, exactly. And the coffee's there waiting for you right now. There is a session at 4 PM here back in this room, digital transformation of pay and money. Hope to see you all back.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.